No.
Hi, everybody.
We miss you.
We miss you.
I look forward to doing workouts with you online.
Okay. We are doing workouts online with you.
Okay, bye.
Okay, bye.
Oh, guys, so fun. Okay, so it's been a little while since Amy and I have done an update, so let's do one. There's a reason why we have been absent in terms of our presence online, and I'm going to go ahead and debrief, say hi to Quincy and Amy of what happened this last week, what will be happening this week, and then what our plan is for the future if the mandate stays in place, if the mandate gets lifted, but yet we have to understand there is still COVID-19, and we have to be a responsible entity within our community, and what that looks like since the state of Washington, the US, and the majority of the world is going with the strategy of social distancing to flatten the curve, and how we have to play a part of that, since that is the strategy we are doing locally here and of course on the national level. So let's go ahead, let's drive into what happened last week. And of course there's going to be a James rant at the very end, so please stay tuned for that. So last week, you would have seen the gym and the coaches being mobilized in a different way to go ahead and provide some services for you guys, even though we are closed. We're doing a AM WOD brief for the COVID-19 at-home workouts. We're going ahead and be doing a live streaming of a WOD via one of the coaches or a member in the PM via Facebook. So this is also the time where I'm going to go ahead and request everybody that is watching this via the email blast. If you're not a Facebook person, I'm so sorry. You have to realize that social distancing is happening, and if you want to stay a part of communities, there's going to have to be some level of involvement in Facebook or in technology beyond what you're comfortable with, and realize it will be for a short period of time, hopefully, but this is a platform that is the easiest to go ahead and run, and people are the most comfortable with using. So please go ahead, request to be part of the CrossFit Deliverance community page. It's private, and if you aren't a Facebook user, it's probably time that you need to jump in. I know myself, I'm not a big social media person, and the only reason why I have it is because of the gym. And I realize that it's just the easiest way and to go ahead and use virtual technology. So also the reason why you didn't see Amy or I really in any of these last activities this last week was because we have been sprinting to go and beat the rain and a possible shelter in place that would have prevented us from essentially finishing some gym remodels that we've been wanting to do for a few years and for a few months to match what we did in the bathrooms, the upstairs mezzanine, and kind of finish those off, because a good chunk of those were like 95% finished. So we're sprinting to do that. We're happy to say this last week, we got 95% there everywhere in the gym. And now we're going to be using this next week to maybe possible future weeks to go and finish off the 5%. It has been crazy, and we've been doing coaches updates for them so they can kind of know what's happening, but know that you haven't seen it push forward out to you guys as gym members, because we've been pulling some crazy hours at the gym doing that, because we have to realize social distancing guidelines and the few other rules, because we're closed. We really can't have any help, or the help that we got was very in short chunks. Big shout out. Thank you for those of you that came out. You know who you are. Thank you. So with that, let's talk about this next week. This next week is going to go ahead and be more of exposure of mobilizing the coaches to have the AM brief for the workout, the PM live stream, and then look for coaches to start to reach out this week via virtual athlete check-ins, via phone or whatever version that they are going to be using. This is this time to go ahead and imagine, like, if everything was normal, what would you want to be talking to the coach, and what goals that you would go ahead and be trying to work towards, and realize that in a day of age like this, we have to realize that Yes, we might have to put pauses on certain goals and aspirations that we have for ourselves, but it's extremely important to stay hopeful and keep momentum in the items that we can control. And if anything, that is extremely important to keep on developing a grit. And that's going to be what the rant is going to be about at the end of this, and the importance of hope, fear, and how those go ahead and with obscurity play into developing grit, and how that is a way for us to go ahead and try to stay in control with as many things that we can in a day of age to where we feel like we might not have any control. And that's going to be important for our mental and emotional state of being. What you're going to be looking for Amy and I to do this next week is finishing up as much as we can, that 5% of the remodels everywhere in the gym that we can, and also running the equipment library. Remember, if you don't want to know what the equipment library is, or you forgot the details of it, Tuesdays at 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. is your time to go ahead, and if you want to return any equipment that you took from the equipment library, that's your time to return it. You don't have to, though. If you can go and keep with the equipment that you already got. But then Wednesdays are the time that you come back to the gym at 10 a.m. through 11 a.m. And that's your time to go and pick up any new equipment that you want. Remember, you're still limited to the 5, and we've adjusted it to where rollers, bands, you could think like soft items at the gym don't count towards the 5 limit. If you don't know what the equipment library is, you want more details, go ahead and look through your email or look in the Facebook membership page and just search for equipment library, and you'll go ahead and be finding details there. Just think of it, Tuesdays are your time to return items if you want to. Wednesdays is to go back through and pick up any new items that you want. The reason why it's not the same day is that's how we're controlling to make sure we're keeping that social distancing guidelines, and also to make sure we have that in between time to also disinfect equipment, to make sure whatever you're picking up or whatever we're getting is essentially, you could say, as much of COVID free that we possibly can. Great. Let's go ahead. Let's talk about what you can look forward to in the future. You're not seeing it, but Pepper's having her hand in between my arm and my body and pretending. Yeah, there you go. Now you hear her. Let's talk about the future, guys. Hi. That's a very pretty ponytail. Yeah, I know. It's a strong upward ponytail. We call that an updo. Oh, Yvonne. Oh, my little French baguette, my croissant. You don't know what that's from, guys. Go ahead and YouTube Mad TV and try to find it. All right. So with that, let's talk about the future. We have to understand that our business at CrossFit Deliverance, its business model was a brick and mortar. It relied on you coming to our physical space to go ahead and take advantage of the lion's share of the services that we had. Although we were going ahead and slowly finding more and more virtual services that we could offer, we have to understand that's what the business model was made off of. So we are working really hard this week, so that way, no matter what the mandate is going into April in the future, we are able to support members as much as we can via a virtual model with the addition of the physical equipment library. And we're creating multiple strategies in terms of if the government mandate stays and we have to remain closed, and then also go ahead and realize what does it look like if the government mandate is lifted. And as I alluded to, how do we still play the part of social distancing? Because we have to understand the CDC still goes ahead and says no more than 10 people meeting in a group. There's a bunch of other different guidelines out there to go ahead and kind of push down the curve, and understanding if the government mandate is lifted, it's going to be only to a certain extent, or if it is lifted all the way, there's still a ethical, moral obligation that we have to play our role, to where it's not like we're going to open the doors and say, okay, great, we're back to 20-person classes. How do we go ahead and still maintain that social guidelines? So look for a bunch of details coming out Wednesday in terms of what the options are, in terms of memberships, in terms of, what is CrossFit Deliverance going to look like beyond March 31st. We are going to have a gigantic leveling moment with you guys during that time, and I'll kind of start the conversation now of understanding that This thing is affecting small to medium-sized businesses in different ways than you could only imagine. And for those of you that are savvy, or even don't feel like you're business savvy, it's becoming pretty obvious that there are certain businesses that are going to get crushed and might never ever recover from something like this. And it's fascinating because the economic situation in the US was good. You could look at most no matter what analyst you looked at, the economic situation was still strong, and something like this that wasn't an economic trigger to create a recession or businesses closing. This is one of those like black swan items that you talk in business, or one of those uncontrollable events that can go and take a strong economy, businesses that are doing well, and wreck them for no reason at all in terms of what their business practices were. So this is where we're going to go ahead and level with you guys and talk to how you can go ahead and support us to make sure once we are done and we can open our doors, how do we make sure we aren't forced to shut down and move on? How can you go ahead and support us, and how can we go ahead and also make sure that you feel like you have options to support us? Because we understand that some of us are going to be able to keep our jobs, right? Or some of you guys will be able to go ahead and keep your jobs, and you're going to be essentially unaffected from this. But some of you are going to be just as economically affected as we are. In reality, Amy and I are trying to look at to where, we lost our jobs 2 weeks ago, and how do we recreate, and how do we go ahead and find new jobs? And some of us, that's it. Like, for example, General Porpoise across the street had to let go every single employee last week, and they're just running with one individual, their manager, running it from open to close for the hours they have. And there's going to be, the longer this COVID thing lasts, the trickle-down effect in terms of how it affects everybody economically will slowly start to push out, right? All of you individuals that are able to work virtually and have felt pseudo-unaffected, if this lasts for months on end, it will eventually touch you. So how do we go ahead and change our business model to where we can all support each other through this? And understanding that we're all going to be affected somehow, some way, in an economic sense, if we already weren't affected already. So there you go, guys. There's that. Look for that big detail on Wednesday. And let's go into the rant. The rant is going to be about Grit. Grit is an amazing book, and if you have access to it via paper, go it, maybe be a little cathartic and pick it up. If you don't, you can easily find it via a virtual source, via Audible, iBooks, whatever it is. But go ahead and I would go ahead and start going through that, because if there was ever a time that you needed to be gritty, or you needed to go ahead and develop grit, today, this time is now. And the big takeaway on the macro sense that I really love is that, how is grit developed? And how do we make sure that we take times like this and we don't become essentially permanently maimed from it, right? So grit is something to where was essentially unquantifiable until the scientist that wrote the book essentially was able to find out in a scientific method and prove that it could be quantified and it could go ahead and be measured. But essentially, the takeaway I love is that grit is developed when you run into obscurity, no matter how small or how massive it may be. But if there is an absence of hope of overcoming that obscurity, you essentially become a shell of a person. You get broken down, and all you become is a fearful individual and a weaker individual. So the importance is that you remain hopeful. You remain hopeful that you can overcome this obscurity. You remain hopeful that you can come out of it in a better place, or a less hurt position that you previously thought you were going to be in. Because if you remain fearful that things are not going to go ahead and turn around for you, you are going to find yourself in a worse position, mentally, emotionally, and most likely in a physical or economic sense. So my rant today is that, and my challenge to you is, how do you become that hopeful individual that is a realist, but yet is a beacon of light to people out there, to where you do not feed this fear cycle of the world ending, of things not being able to go back into a positive position that it previously was? How do you go ahead and be that light, that person of hope that makes people's lives better around you, or tries to maintain this optimistic outlook that we will all get through this and that we will all go ahead and overcome what this has? Now, some of us are going to be running into a extreme amount of tragedy in terms of loved ones passing away or permanently being scarred from the physical effects of what COVID-19 is. But if we can go ahead and try to segment that away from every other aspect of how this disease is affecting the world, we will come out in a better position, and we have to remain hopeful. Guys, that's my challenge to you, and my rant is stay hopeful, be that beacon of hope and light, so that we can all be more gritty and tenacious people on the back end of this, rather than being fearful and letting this break us down more than what it already will. Guys, we'll see you on the back end, and look for that update come Wednesday.